Hi guys, welcome back to another YouTube video. My name is Malaya and I am your go-to PhD content creator, and I guess you're here because you're considering doing a PhD. But before I begin, please like, comment and subscribe, and comment down anything that you would like me to do videos on moving forward. I do have to start by saying that doing a PhD just to be called a doctor is a big motivator for some people, but it's probably not the motivation you need at 3 a.m. when you are so tired you feel like your eyeballs are going to roll out of your head and you have to analyze this data for a project or a presentation or whatever it might be. So it would be nice if there's some other kind of motivation outside of being doctor, whoever you are. And on top of that motivation probably also shouldn't just be the amount of money that you can earn with a PhD at the end, because a lot of PhDs, against a lot of myths, don't actually earn that much money, especially considering the amount of years they've been studying and preparing for. I mean, there are jobs that are far more accessible by having a PhD, but in general there are a lot of roles that do pay well that are accessible without a PhD anyway, so just keep that in mind. Send your routes into most jobs, so do have a think about whether or not spending your 3.5, 4, 5, 6, however many years doing a PhD, whether or not that is necessary, because if you put that same amount of years into a job, would you end up on the same level anyway? Keep that in mind. It's all fun and games being able to say, oh, the stipend is enough for me for so and so amount of time and then I'll get a part-time job. No, I think it's really important that you have a concrete idea of how A, your PhD will be funded, and B, how you will survive financially, whether that's through your funding body, they pay you, or if that's you having to pick up a part-time job, or if you're doing your PhD part-time and you're working part-time, like whatever it might be, whatever that blend is, you need to make sure before you commit to a PhD that that is truly for you. PhDs are a really long time and they tend to happen, I feel like, in the years where life really happens. I mean, life never stops happening, right? But in your 20s, I feel like a lot of things can change. People can get married, people can have children, literally all sorts of things go on, the passing of our loved ones, etc, etc. So just being sure, at least being as sure as you possibly can be going into a PhD, that you have a line of defense, whether that's savings or you know that you have enough money to live, really is important. I think you need to be realistic about what a PhD is, what it entails, and everything in between. I mean, the good, the bad, and the really ugly. A PhD is fun. Yes, you're researching about things you're interested in, but it does get to a point you can very much sit down and just cry. In fact, for the first few months of my PhD, all I did was cry. It does get better, but then it does get worse, and then it gets better again. It's just up and down, up and down. But I don't know a single PhD student who can sit here and say it's been easy. Whether that's a relationship with a supervisor might be strained for some PhD students. It could be imposter syndrome. It could be just the lack of connection that they have to their project. It could be a whole range of things. It could even be things outside of their PhD that are influencing their performance in their PhD. It's just a PhD itself is hard, and I feel like it's more hard mentally than it is academically. And I used to watch YouTube videos before doing my PhD, and they'd all say the same thing about it being mentally challenging more than academic, and I didn't believe it. Well, it's not that I didn't believe it, I didn't quite truly understand what they meant by that, because it's like, it's a degree, how much harder can it be? But no, it's more mentally challenging to keep doing something and to continuously fail and not be 100% sure why you're failing and just trying different things each time. It's like, that just sounds very straightforward, but it is very humbling actually. And even with the peaks and troughs that you have with a PhD, it's just so like emotionally draining sometimes, because sometimes you feel like, Einstein, you are the world's biggest genius, and then tomorrow you feel like you should have just learned how to bake sourdough and started your own bakery. There have been times where I've not seen my friends in so long because I've been so snowed in with all of my work, and obviously contributing to that is the fact that I have a part-time job. But I'm even quite lucky as it is. Me having a computational biology PhD means that all of my research and all of my experiments are on my laptop, whereas some people literally have to be in the lab. That means coming in on weekends, coming in really early in the morning, leaving really late, or even coming back in the evening if they're like, I don't know, cell cultures need, I don't know what they be doing, but they have to do a lot of extra hours. Whereas me, if I need to do something like that, I just open up my laptop. My lab follows me wherever I go. But that's also a double-edged sword in itself, because how do I stop doing work? My work is always accessible to me. I can't say, oh well, that's at the lab, let me just leave it alone. My lab is here with me. My lab is right there. So pros and cons. So a PhD often feels quite fruitless, particularly in the first year or two of your program. So this is where you're building up the necessary skill set, familiarizing yourself with your project, and doing kind of the groundwork to set up for maybe whether that's papers or good findings. But that wouldn't be possible without the slow progress. I feel like a lot of people do say with a PhD, obviously there's ups and downs, like I've been saying this whole video, but the general progress of it is like very slow, and then all of a sudden it just starts increasing very rapidly. And for a long time I felt like I wasn't actually getting anywhere, but it's not until you stop and you have a look back and you realize that you have actually come a long way. It's just that that long journey hasn't necessarily produced something big and tangible, but when you look back and start listing out all the things you've done, you do feel a lot better about where you're at. But yes, you shouldn't do a PhD if you feel like you're in need of instant gratification or some kind of reward or recognition. Maybe a master's would be better for you, potentially a master's by research. Are you ready for constructive criticism? Now, everybody always says, you know, I can take criticism, blah, 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 blah. It's really important to not be offended by things people say. Being able to not be offended by criticism is one of the biggest key skills that I think any person needs, not just a PhD student. And especially important to consider within academia, a lot of people don't have maybe the charisma, or maybe I would dare say social skills that are present in other career fields such as sales. So sometimes that people aspect can be missing, whether that's within PhD students or PIs or whoever it may be. And sometimes when you're receiving criticism, you have to remember that they're criticizing you often in your best interest, as opposed to just trying to berate you. It may not always come across in the best way, but just trying to be able to not internalize it and just take it at service level for what it is and make those changes as appropriate. And I feel like I've been very lucky. My supervisors have been amazing people. They have great social skills, great scientific skills. They're very understanding, but I am lucky, and I feel like most PhD students don't have the experience that I currently have. So do keep that in mind. Criticism makes you want to hide behind a rock and cry. Then a PhD, you're just going to stay permanently under a rock and just permanently cry. Being a PhD student or candidate is part and parcel of like taking on feedback and improving yourself. So I did mention a little earlier about doing a master's by research. I think that that is a great alternative if you feel like there are certain skill sets that you'd like to learn and also demonstrate, but you maybe don't want to commit to the 3 to 6 years that a PhD can be, and even longer. A master's by research in the UK is typically 12 months, and you can get that funded, although you probably won't get a stipend unless you get some kind of grant or bursary, but you can look on university web pages for that. But Masters by Research is pretty much a 12-month program where you basically work on a mini PhD project. It's like it's like a bigger version of your undergrad dissertation, but a smaller version of a PhD. And I feel like a lot of roles can be accessed through a Masters by Research, so please consider that if you're on the fence. You also have a master's taught, and that's kind of like how you have in undergrad, you have the modules, you have your exams, and you have a small dissertation project, except that's over the course of 12 months instead of 3 years that an undergrad is. And that's what I did before coming into my PhD. And I did that because I wanted to learn more about bioinformatics, as well as a few of the other modules that they had during my master's, because I did a master's in biomedical science. So again, it was more general. I wanted to like dip my toes in different things before I committed to doing bioinformatics or computational biology. If you're not looking towards doing research in academia, then I definitely have a look at industry. A lot of industry jobs do not require a PhD, they don't require a master's. And there's actually instances where if you should decide you wanted a master's or a PhD, they'd happily fund you, which is a great alternative, potentially a lot more secure than having to reapply for grant funding during the course of your PhD if you've not secured funding from, for example, BBSRC for the duration of your PhD. If you're still not sure if a PhD is for you, then have a look at some of my other videos where you can see day in the life and week in the life vlogs of a PhD student. I don't talk too much about my research just because it has to be kept under wraps, but you can see what a general day-to-day is like. Some days are short, some days are pretty long, but I do try to keep doing different things just to keep me entertained, because you can't come and do a PhD and lose your sanity. It's really not worth it. But the fact that you're here and you're taking the time to learn or figure out whether or not a PhD is for you is a great thing, because a lot of people will just apply with no idea. They get into it and realize, oh, this is not at all what I thought it was, and end up dropping out. So kudos to you. Make sure you like, comment and subscribe and follow on with my journey, and if you decide to start any similar content, I would love to follow on with yours. So DM me on Instagram, comment below, whatever it might be. But yes, thank you for joining me on another video, guys. My name is Malaya, and until next time.